In this topic, we are going to look at the foundational layer of IS auditing, the standards, guidelines, and ethics that govern how audits are conducted. We will explore the ISACA IS Audit and Assurance Standards framework, understand the role of guidelines and procedures in supporting those standards, examine the ISACA Code of Professional Ethics and what it demands from us as auditors, look at how audit standards connect to organizational audit charters, and finally, discuss what happens when auditors fail to comply with these standards and ethical obligations. So let's start right at the foundation. Every profession has a set of rules that defines how work should be done. Doctors follow medical protocols, lawyers follow bar association rules, and IS auditors follow the ISACA IS Audit and Assurance Standards framework. Think of it as the rule book that tells us what good auditing looks like. This framework has three layers. At the top, you have standards. These are mandatory. They set the minimum acceptable level of performance. Below that, you have guidelines. These help auditors apply the standards in practice. And then there are tools and techniques, practical resources that help you execute. Now here's where it gets interesting. Standards tell you what to do. Guidelines tell you how to do it. That distinction matters enormously in the field. Imagine you are auditing a hospital's access control system. The standard says you must evaluate controls. The guideline says, here is a structured approach to test those controls. See how one supports the other? That is the relationship at play here. Why does this framework exist? Because without it, every auditor would approach work differently, and assurance would mean nothing. Consistency is the goal. Credibility is the outcome. Now that we understand standards exist, let's ask, why do we need guidelines at all? Standards are intentionally principle-based. They are written to apply across industries, geographies, and audit types. But that broad applicability means they cannot spell out every detail. That is exactly where guidelines step in. Think of it this way. A standard might say, the IS auditor shall gather sufficient and appropriate evidence. But what does sufficient actually mean in practice? Guidelines help you answer that. They provide structured approaches, suggest techniques, and offer examples so you can exercise professional judgment with confidence. When I was consulting on an IS audit for a logistics company, the audit team struggled with how much evidence was enough for access control testing. We went back to the ISACA guidelines, which gave us a structured sampling approach. That clarity changed everything. The team moved from uncertainty to confidence within hours. Procedures take it one step further. They are organization-specific documents that translate guidelines into step-by-step actions for your audit team. So standards set the bar, guidelines show you how to reach it, and procedures make it operational in your specific environment. All three work together, and a strong IS audit function always maintains all three layers. Let me ask you something. If you discovered during an audit that a senior executive was bypassing access controls, would you know exactly what your ethical obligations are? That clarity comes from the ISACA Code of Professional Ethics. The code is not just a list of nice-sounding principles. It is a binding commitment that every ISACA member and certification holder makes. It covers several key obligations: supporting the implementation of appropriate standards, performing duties with objectivity and due diligence, serving stakeholders in a lawful and honest manner, maintaining confidentiality, and importantly, not engaging in or condoning any conduct that discredits the profession. Here is a real scenario to think about. Imagine an IS auditor discovers that their manager has been sharing audit findings informally with vendors before the report is finalized. That is a confidentiality breach, and the code demands the auditor act on it. Staying silent is itself an ethical violation. The implications are serious. Violations can lead to revocation of your ISACA certification. But beyond certification, think about the professional reputation at stake. Ethics is not just about following rules. It is about being someone that organizations trust with their most sensitive systems and information. That trust is the entire foundation of the IS audit profession. Here is something that often confuses early career auditors. ISACA standards are external, set by a global professional body. But inside every organization, the audit function is governed by an internal document called the Audit Charter. How do these two things relate? Think of ISACA standards as the constitution of IS auditing, the supreme law. The Audit Charter is like the bylaws of your specific organization. It must be consistent with the constitution, but tailored to your context. The Charter defines the purpose, authority, and responsibility of the internal audit function. It grants auditors the right to access systems, people, and data. Without it, your authority as an auditor is unclear. Now, here is the connection. A well-designed audit charter incorporates the requirements of ISACA standards by reference or by design. For example, ISACA standards require auditors to be independent. The charter must reflect that independence, defining reporting lines that protect auditors from management influence. In practice, when a new CISO joins an organization and tries to restrict the audit team's access to security logs, the audit charter is what you point to. It defines your rights. So before you start any audit engagement, knowing your charter, understanding what authority you carry, is absolutely essential. Let's get direct about this. What actually happens if an IS auditor does not comply with ISACA standards or the Code of Ethics? The consequences operate at multiple levels: personal, organizational, and professional. At the personal level, ISACA can revoke certifications. And once that happens, your professional credibility in this field is severely damaged. In a profession where trust and credentials matter enormously, that is a career-defining consequence. I have seen professionals lose consulting contracts simply because questions were raised about their audit objectivity. At the organizational level, non-compliant audits can lead to flawed findings. Imagine an auditor who skips evidence validation because of time pressure. The audit report says controls are effective. 6 months later, a breach occurs in exactly the area that was not properly tested. That organization now faces not just a security incident, but a failed audit that offered false assurance. And at the professional level, widespread ethical failures erode trust in IS auditing as a discipline. Regulators start questioning audit quality. Companies start treating audits as box-ticking exercises rather than genuine assurance. The entire ecosystem suffers. So when we talk about compliance with standards and ethics, this is not theoretical. It is the difference between an audit function that adds real value and one that creates dangerous blind spots.